see how this goes. Sorry, I thought I started filming and I didn't because I haven't live streamed in probably a year. So I just thought this format would be better to discuss the topic because maybe some people want to add into it. It is kind of a topic where I'll probably forget things and stuff like that. So I thought the format would be better. So got first guest, hello, Mr. M. And there, I'm sure maybe other people enter as they do, but I'm not too fast. This is just kind of a different format I thought about doing. So I should introduce myself. My name is Rebecca. I'm a fish biologist and ichthyologist, PhD student. So I'm studying the evolution, the morphology, so the body shape, the biology of Loricariid catfishes, so also known as plecos within the aquarium trade. So looking at that whole diversity. So I look at more of the fish biology itself rather than the ecology. So I kind of have another aspect on this. And I think it's kind of a little bit important. And also because maybe there's not so many fish biologists actually on YouTube in the hobby. There's quite a few anyway. So I wanted to discuss filters because they are kind of a big topic. And I've worked in the aquarium trade for 6 years, and I also have worked with many different filters, different types of filters, and I've also brought some from the US. Hi, Stephen P. Welcome to the stream. So today is kind of my sort of interpretation or ideas about filters. Why should we have them? Maybe should we not? So I've used a lot of definitely externals, and especially when you're working in the aquarium trade, they are one of the major ones that you use. So what are filters? Filtration is kind of a weird one because a lot of beginners or kind of people that aren't too familiar with the aquarium trade might not know really the difference between a filter and a pump, and I've kind of seen that quite a bit. And that also comes into air pumps, although they're used in the filtration, a lot of people aren't too sure. So a filter is just that sort of mechanical unit that is used to remove or change a certain chemical, I guess, or substance. Is not kind of it's not the same as a pump. Pumps are just to push water from one end to another. Hence, air pumps, well, they're moving air. So there's kind of a difference, and you see it, especially if you're looking at power heads and wave makers. So what types of filters are there? There's externals. So they come in a wide diversity of different units. So you've got typical canister filters. So they're the most common you'll see in the UK. And then sumps. Some people say they should belong in marine, or they aren't seen in freshwater. They're really common in freshwater, particularly in discus, but you'll see in other hobbies. I really like using sumps because there's so much ease of access, but they're a bit more faffy to set up. Other external filters you've got like, what is it? I would say hang on the backs count. They're not actually quite common in the UK. I'm not a big fan. I did when I was like 16, maybe 18 actually. When I went to the US, I brought over some aqua clears, and I tried them out with step up transformer, and I wasn't a big fan, but they kind of count as an external. I think there would be other types of externals. Obviously, you've got the pond type, so you've got pressure filters, the gravity fed filters, and they're probably maybe something you'll see in a more of a store or public aquarium. I've seen gigantic canisters as well. So my canisters, they're 50 centimeters tall. But if you look at like stores, they can have ones which are absolutely gigantic. You could almost fit a person inside, and they're not even a sump, they're just a canister filter. You've got different types of filtration meters. You've got fluidized filters. I hate fluidized filters unless they've got some mechanical filtration, because you end up with detritus everywhere. So Also, you've got like traditional, like, I guess, filters when it comes to externals. You've got the media, so ceramic media, and then maybe sponge media, either or, and then looking into like different types of filters. So the next lot I've got is internals. So as Coro has mentioned, there's sponge. Sponges come in like wide different types, and then obviously with internals you've got air versus sort of electricity driven, I guess would be the division. So all of those ones mentioned definitely are. So I don't know. I think Stephen P mentioned with hobs and canisters. I don't know. In the UK, we did actually have aquaclears provided, I think, till maybe the 80s, and then they didn't. They kind of got run off our market, and we only had the traditional internals. Like I've got one hidden there. You'll sometimes see them. So the traditional sort of box internals powered by a pump. Obviously, internals you can have air driven. So that might be the Hamburg Matten, might be a sponge, might be under gravel, but they can also be power driven. So my first tank actually had a power driven under gravel filter. And I swear Aquaclear's really keen on keeping behind the times with filters, because one of the tanks even had overhead filtration, which is kind of, you never really see. There's a few videos of how to make your own, but this was one built into the tank. So moving media, as Cora, you mentioned, that's kind of more fluidized. So I've worked with K1. Don't think I've worked with sand filters, but the mechanical filtration element of it makes it really difficult. So with internals, obviously you've got power driven. That's probably the most common in the UK. So you've got the traditional internals, sort of little box units working by a pump, power head. What would be the best word? Pump. And then it's just moving through certain different media. And this really depends on the actual brand, because brands use all sorts of things, I guess, because they've each makes it each unique. So, and I think it depends where you start. What size of tank obviously would affect what you start with, and what kind of fish you're wanting to keep. A lot of people, and I have no issues with Hamburg Matten filters, they're really good, but they're very much towards a certain type of aquarium, particularly breeder tanks, which maybe not be the highest stock. So what have I got? So why filters? So there's several reasons why I filter. Obviously, the biggest aspect is their filters. They're filtering something, they're removing or processing something. And we always classify it into those three sections. We've got biological media. So many of us all of us probably use the main two, which would be biological and mechanical. So biological might be what's it like, ceramic rings, sponges. Sponge is actually great if you want to clear detritus, sort of anything from blocking the media. So because you could just squish it, whereas the ceramic media is just going to get clogged. For some kind of, I guess, some larger, less hold ones, I guess you could power filter it. And yeah, sumps are absolutely they're just so much easier to use, because you don't need to disengage anything. Leaks are, I would say, less of a worry, and you can just reach in and change media, add media, whatever. And if you look at the marine hobby, obviously you can actually have almost fish there. And obviously aquarium stores use, well, they say sumps, but they're not entirely sumps. So biological media is definitely one of the most important. That's what we look at when we think about nitrifying bacteria or other bacteria as well. I think there's a lot more to it. Obviously, there's a few papers suggesting archaea, and this has been around for a while. I think actually Dr. Timms was one of the first to mention it, that became a way topic. But archaea is this other group. So you've got prokaryotes, which is I guess, so that would be archaea, I guess, and bacteria. And there's this debate which is more closely related. But archaea is one you don't actually see added in, like, when you're starting up a filter, starting up a cycle, you never see added. And I don't know what, it's been mentioned for ages, but biological is probably the one that a lot of people deal with. And many people talk about substrates and biological filtration. A big thing and I think this is the most important point that I wanted to mention anyway, is that when we're looking at living things in general, we're thinking about that they need to feed, and they need some sort of energy source, and often they need something like oxygen, so for respiration. In the case of nitrifying bacteria, they definitely need oxygen, because if you look at nitrification, you're going from ammonia, nitrites, God, those words are so similar, and that's adding oxygen on. The oxygen's got to come from somewhere. It doesn't come from the water, as far as I know. Because that'd be awful. And then it's adding an oxygen in each time. So it needs that supply of oxygen, it needs that supply of nutrients, because it needs other things to grow. So if you're only thinking about the substrate, how much flow do you know that's going through that substrate? Often not very much. And if you're looking at very clogged substrate, it's not going to have that much flow through it. It's not going to have that much nutrients through it. It's not going to have much, really. So it's different when it comes to, I guess, soils, because you've got that aspect of, there's a whole different sort of community out there when it comes to soils. I mean, in the horticulture environment, but definitely when in the horticulture environment, there's a lot of discussion regarding the type of substrate. So whether it's particularly porous, it needs to have a lot of oxygen flow through it, hence why you might add perlite, vermiculite sometimes. I mean, you might use different things like cork bark. So it's kind of a little bit more complex, and I think it's a surface area. It will gain nitrifying bacteria. Yes, it will, but the amount will depend on how much source of oxygen, how much source of nutrients is getting. And part of that nutrients is that ammonia to nitrites to nitrates sort of cycle. And it's a little bit more complex, I think. And I don't think there's the papers really on the topic. And when there is, it's only in certain aspects of the hobby. And so mechanical, one of the most useful, I think, just if you're thinking about, firstly, having a clearer tank. This does not look clear at the moment. And I cleaned the filter today. That the palms haven't actually helped. I've got quite a few vorticella growing on the tank. So it looks a little bit cloudy where it's not, and it is still a bit. But because it's just, there's a little bit more nutrients and I guess a little bit more suspended matter than normal. And then also bacteria. But a big element, mechanical filtration, is it does polish the tank. You get clearer water. Tannins are a totally different issue. It's not going to remove tannins. Mechanical filtration also keeps the media further down clear. So in a filter, you want that media clear, so there's more access for nutrients, so that so the fish waste, the ammonia from the fish, and also oxygen down into the filter. So I think it's really important just to consider that, really. And that's why I kind of use it. So I use it at the top. I think some people actually use it at the bottom. So it goes from larger to smaller. But if you want to clean the filter less, but maybe change the mechanical filtration more, I add floss first. And there are versions which I think are really good for if you want to clean the tank less. Well, clean the filter less, or not throw away floss. So other things, so mulm is a big discussion in its own. So I did a video on that, and I think people confuse mold with detritus and what people mean by detritus. Detritus is a little bit more complex, and it does just mean stuff. So we've discussed it with mold. What are they eating? We don't really know, and they're probably not actually eating what we're seeing as mold. Obviously, yes, and the undergravel filters are entirely different when it comes to substrate, but you're using gravels generally. And I have used undergravel filters. I don't like them just because of the fish I keep, because obviously sand is a benefit to quite a few different fishes. And there are sort of different aspects of it, I guess. You can look at, there are river manifold systems which could count as undergravel, but they kind of work a bit differently. And then you've got, the suspended glass tanks, where you've got the actual substrate, the tank itself almost on a level, and then you've got the water actually running underneath while within the tank. There was a Maidenhead store that had it for rainbow shiners. And there are loads of different ideas for it. It's just suiting it almost to the fish you're keeping and the type of fish. So mechanical media, keeping now the media clear, I guess, keeping the water clear of sediment. If you get a lot of sediment, you'll get generally a lot of filter feeding organisms. I wouldn't say algae particularly, but you will get different filter feeders. So these are Bordetella, they're some type of protozoa. You could potentially get bryozoa. They're not particularly common. You could get Hydra. Hydra, I think, are always actually present within a tank. They just tend to outbreak when they're getting a certain food source. Maybe it is shrimp, maybe it's something else, etc. sort of thing. You'll get more filter feeding organisms, and one of them could be biofilms. So you probably get more of a haze to the tank. That's when I tend to get it. Sort of high levels of nutrients as well for biofilms, bacterial biofilms. But sometimes you don't actually know which one is, like, what bacteria it even is, because you can't identify it. And chemical media, I never really use chemical media. So this is one that I think a lot of beginners go for. And I think along with replacing media constantly, which I don't think is a good idea, because you kind of want that really stable, strong, sort of larger population of bacteria. It's kind of one of those hassles that you have to do too frequently, every 4 to 6 weeks, I think, for carbon, and a lot of them. The only one I do use is polyfilter, because I'm actually really curious by how it works. They won't announce it, but it's a little sponge. You can kind of see the sort of crystals of something on it, and it's so it removes, I think, organics, copper, ammonia. Ammonia is the one that bothers me a little bit, because I don't want anything competing with the actual bacteria. So I don't have it in long. I don't have it in continuously. Hi, Kelly. So thinking about think about that sort of thing. You don't really want, I guess, polyfilter in too long, but it's really useful. Quite a few people I actually know use it for the same reason as me. I have it always at hand if I think there's some toxins around. So if someone's like lit a candle, or spraying paints, because most people, well, both me and my partner paint Warhammer. Paints get sprayed outside. I don't want any fumes coming near. If I'm worried any fumes come near from outside, then I pop a polyfilter in the tank, just a little cube. So it is kind of, there are some really interesting aspects, I think, to chemical filtration. But I don't see the need for half of it. Half of it is if you have a stable tank. And I'm not discussing here RO filters or HMA filters. They're an entirely different topic. They do have a use. But I also think certain things might produce swings in the tank. So using peat, anything that messes with any of the hardness, any of the pH in the tank, you're swinging it down, then up, actually within the tank rather than using as RO. Hi, Silver Creek. So I don't really use any chemical filtration. It does have its use, obviously, for removing chemicals. Activated carbon's quite useful then. And yes, I've seen polyfilter used for shipping fish, never in the UK though. I think some people actually, I've seen activated carbon used from imports, and I think it's a good idea. And it's actually been mentioned to stop self-poisoning in Corydorus, but I've never actually seen it polyfilter used, or even within the stores. Actually, no, Pier does sell their fish with carbon if they're knowing that you're going quite a journey. So if I'm going to Pier, then they put carbon in the bags that I'm using for the fish. So it does have its uses, and it does get slated maybe a bit too much. So obviously all of this is surface area. And one thing, so I was reading on the Polyfilter website there, and this shows how bad I am at chemistry, but they did have some really good idea or mentions of about surface area regarding chemical filtration, I guess. Does it apply to biological? I don't know, but they're mentioning about Van der Waals forces, and that shows how bad my chemistry is, because that was, I remember it, but I know nothing about it. But it's quite an interesting product anyway, regarding chemical filtration. It's probably the only one I actually have on hand, just in case. Because you never know. You never know what could happen. Sometimes you just want to know what's in the tank itself. Oh no. What the hell? 5 seconds. I'm just going to pause it because stop cam. My spiny eel has just gone inside the filter. I think I've sorted it. I have no idea how or what. I've got, actually I should switch it back on. So I've got two half-banded spiny eels, and I've never seen this before, but this is the same one that used to not having a net hanging. It used to go up against the externals and kind of up against the flow. And I just saw it literally, because I've got it internal in the tank, it just literally went inside the outlet. And I've no idea how or why. And then I opened it and there was nothing inside. I was like, damn, because obviously you'd see if it went to the actual impeller, but it's intact. It's just obviously it's exhausted, I guess, which I'm gonna have to sort that out. I don't know how they do it, and I don't know why it did it. But so this is the one that will watch me from the glass. I think it's a male. I think I also have a female in there. I don't know how it actually did that, but luckily it's intact. I didn't see any wounds or anything like that. But some of my fish are just mental. Like, these guys spook for the sake of it, which has now triggered these guys to be shy. But these are just not bothered. So the platies hate me because they just made them. And I've had an argument with the two Baron sisters. Well, two of the largest Baron sisters have had an argument over a cave, which is now ditched anyway after making her very unhappy about him taking her cave. Not that one. He's okay for now. But so one thing about filtration, I think you'll see so many things talking about, and we talk about turnover, we're talking about we talk about like filtration, we talk about nitrifying bacteria, but we never talk about like water movement, or it does get mentioned, but I think it never gets emphasized how important it is, because you've not just got water movement from the turnover aspect of actually flowing through that nitrifying bacteria. You've also got water movement from the oxygen perspective, or moving, so you don't have one area which is a completely different maybe pocket of I guess even, I don't know whether ammonia can do that, I don't know if it's possible, but a sort of a pocket that's entirely separate. Lower oxygen particularly can occur, maybe a lower pH, depends on your tank, I guess, but it keeps that circulation, and oxygen is the most important. Fishes do need oxygen through their gills. That's why they all have gills, I think. Yes, some fish can. Yeah, I've got it like there because I was going to make it into video. So I was like, I need everything just in case, because otherwise I know I'll get a comment or something, or I'll be like, I've forgotten something. But it's so important to have flow from an oxygen perspective, because fish do use flow. Yes, quite a few are facultative air breathers, quite a few are obligate. So facultative means they don't need to. A lot of catfish are like that. Obligate, I don't know the actual extent of it because I've never looked into it. A lot of people say betta are obligate air breathers. Are they? I don't know. But it's kind of, I would give, if they are facultative or if they are obligate, just access to air. But they still are going to need that turnover of oxygen, because it's for their gills and that turnover of everything else in the tank. And I think it's really important just to provide that. And many fishes, obviously, this is where the exception comes in. If you're thinking elsewhere, there's many different types of hill stream fishes. A lot of fishes we keep actually come from somewhere with a pretty good current. So not just loricarids, hill stream loaches, many loaches actually, even better when you look at the habitats they come from. It's not like it's still stagnant puddle. I think people sometimes confuse them with annual killifish, but it's like they're not actually these fish that come from, they need that flow for enrichment, for behavior. That some of them, their morphology is entirely on that. And it doesn't mean that there's these long streamlined things. Think about silver dollars, pacu. They can be found in quite strong sort of currents. So it's quite important to think about that from an enrichment side. And that's where powerheads maybe come in. And I'm a bit forgiving right now because of like electricity costs. They're quite energy expensive, powerheads. In a way, I don't know why, because some of them have the same like output as a filter, and less of a like head height, I guess. I don't know, because there's a little bit more to it. And FX6 on the 25 litre could work depending on the fish. So hillstream loaches, quite a few loricariids. If you look at Panteray, this is a German store, but they had a hillstream tank, and it shows these waters that you wouldn't expect fishes to be adapted to. And black ghost knifefish are one of my favourites, along with any gymnotiform. I really want to keep gymnotus again, which is like similar, but they're a little more tube shaped. They got a sort of a little smiley face, and they're a little bit more nasty. The ones I like are like, I had Gymnotus javari, which is the striped one. They're really cute. It's just finding them at the moment, and I don't really want to travel too far. And undergravel filtration. So obviously I started that. I actually worked for a store that had entirely undergravel filtration, and it was the bane of my life. I did a video on it, and I did use it since. Solicitors mean something quite different here, actually, because I don't know, because I just, the word, whenever I see it, it reminds me, because I'm related to a solicitor, and in the UK that means a lawyer. Like, a solicitor is a lawyer, but we saw a sign in the US that said no solicitors, so we like, can't go here because you're not allowed lawyers. Just a random thing. But undergravel filters, it's just a pain to clean. Actually removing that detritus that isn't actually probably doing anything, it's just this solid mass, is absolutely a pain. The air powered ones, having to replace those air stones really frequently is like, oh, it would be like every 2 weeks. So that was in the store, and they had like 40 or so air powered. Stores use all sorts. You see stores using every sort of filtration under the sun, and sometimes you don't even see the filtration till you actually work in the store, or you might ask. Like, I think Maidenhead Aquatics, a lot of people are quite surprised about some of theirs. Like, do you think it's got a proper sump, but it's this gigantic canister filter? So, oh. Okay. So another time, so I obviously had ponds. I worked with ponds. My parents have two technical ponds and another 2 for wildlife, and I think they're really interesting. They're quite fun if you can have one. They're another sort of fish keeping that most people don't think of or don't experiment with. So this comes into plants, and with plants, I think firstly it's this whole thing when it comes to filtration that is a little bit maybe more complex, is that there's a lot of variables to it. Plants are like any organisms, but they're also like a machine, I guess. And I saw someone actually describe corals as a machine, and it makes you look at them in a whole new light, because they are almost like an input and output, but that output depends on the input and vice versa, sort of thing. So there's a lot of variables with plants, so whether they're going to actually do what people think they do. And I think a lot of them, given that many are terrestrial or maybe in a certain habitat, they're not actually doing as much as people would think they do, just because they're not in their ideal habitat. And they might be plants, but it doesn't mean they're doing the same. A common misconception, actually, this is one I don't know why I see, but people will say that it adds into the plants will suffocate you at night thing, which I can say this room does not suffocate me. I've got a lot of plants in here, and you can't see half them. It does not suffocate me when I close the door. But they do respire constantly. They just photosynthesize. So I think it's certain stages. So my knowledge of plant physiology ended in 2nd year undergrad, because I like their taxonomy. I don't like their physiology. It's too much. But most of their photosynthesis is at when the lights are on. And I guess obviously certain wavelengths of light and that got my memory on it. But there's also other variables. I think it's just such a thing with nutrients is a big one. So I think if you're in the horticulture, you see it, you think about it a little bit more. Or if you've got an interest in horticulture, so if they're going to be uptaking certain nutrients, how much, and to what extent, really depends on that nutrients available. If you've got too much of one, it might cause a dip in how much they're going to take of another. Depends on the pH, depends on the temperature, and this is all species specific, and it depends on their actual tank. And whether they're in their ideal habitat. Even looking at plant morphology, it changes so much. They're so different from animals, I guess, in how quickly they respond, but still animals are capable of this. Is it polymorphism? But if you keep saying monstera, if you don't have it with some aspect or something to climb on, it ends up a lot more leggy. It's unlikely to get the fenestration, so these holes. But quite a few plants, you'll see this different morphology. And this comes into when people quote studies. And the studies, you've got to think about what methods are they using and how is it how is the plant growing in other aspects, particularly when we think about pothos. Pothos is basically this in a Naphia form, because I'm not particularly keen on pothos. Obviously with photosynthesis using CO2 and respiration using oxygen, air stone all through would be best. I'm not entirely sure about this because if something diffuses one way, it can diffuse the other way. So if you think about that water level, as much as one oxygen is going to diffuse in, it's also going to diffuse out, and the same with CO2. The difference is obviously where you've got biological organisms. So plants, they can control that. So fish also control certain things leaving them and entering them. So CO2 can be created through decomposition as long as you've got oxygen. Otherwise, you're getting methane, just because you need for carbon plus oxygen, CO2. And also, if you've not got the oxygen, I think you do get other things produced. A lot of people mention sulfur. Oh, you obviously get the sulfur smell, but anaerobic respiration. I'm just gonna say no. I'm gonna leave it, and I'll write it down on the Discord what it is, because otherwise I'm gonna say something completely different. No, because I was thinking, I don't know why I was thinking more along the alcohol route. Obviously, yeah, methane. But it's kind of a little bit more complicated, and decomposition is obviously a whole nother topic altogether. So it's a Discord for Fish Fam, which most of the people here are on. I've also got my Facebook groups if people want to ask there, and I can write it on there if needed. So I can do either. I've also it's not my own Discord group. So fish do breathe out CO2. Most fish do both. So do aerobic respiration. So they will produce CO2. That's probably the right word. And they do anaerobically respire as well. The extent and how much they can depends on the species. I think goldfish are really great for this, where they can do quite long times underwater in very low oxygen, very low temperatures as well. So bear that in mind. And they do anaerobically respire for quite a bit. But that's because their metabolism is so low. But so think, is that all on plants? I think the main point is that it depends on what different levels of nutrients you have. And it's when you look into horticulture, that includes ponds, you'll be thinking about different types of soils. And I think when you start out, you're like, I want houseplant soil for this, a cactus soil for that. And it actually becomes a little bit more complex depending on what you keep, what levels of aeration, and depends how much you actually care whether the plant will die, because that's a big one for me, because I often don't, given I use, what was it, John Innes number 3 for almost everything mixed with perlite. And also I have been using a lot of sphagnum moss, just because it's quite nice and it's easier, a little bit more aerated. But it doesn't mean things die. Plants are quite adaptable. But bear in mind, they're probably not actually working at the level people think they are, or like they might not be taking up as much ammonia. They might not, or there might be that sort of difference between ammonia and ammonium. And also whether they take up nitrates or nitrites. And I did see a paper that was quite interesting, and I can find it again, that just talked about how different pHs work for different plants. So there's sometimes an idea that a lower pH is better for certain nutrient uptake. It depends on the plant. And it's quite interesting when you think about oxygen levels and whether some plants actually don't perform that well when you've got that surface movement. So it's thinking about so think about the fish versus plants and what you actually prefer, whether you're more focused on fish, whether you're more focused on plants, and that balance between the two. I think sphagnum moss is largely unsustainable. There are sustainable, collections of it. So I tend to reuse mine as well. I reuse soil as well. So a lot of people throw it out for disease worries. I reuse it. The only issue is now I have alocasias growing out pots I never thought they would be, because I thought the plant died due to spider mites. So I literally got the soil, mixed it with others, and repotted other plants. So I've now got alocasia, Amazonica, alocasia. Oh, what's it? Sabrina. And I think a stingray somewhere, like just growing in different pots. I have got some of the adults of them too, so it's a bit weird. Like I started seeing these shoots growing, and they look a bit like my Morphophallus, which is the voodoo lily that I've got. Oh, this is the little baby one, but there you can see. It's a bit drippy, but I've got 2 of those just growing there. But it's quite useful for propagation and anything that needs, or you're a bit bored about aeration. So I've got, she doesn't need it, but philodendron might, had it in my head, but I've forgotten the name. And then also Anthurium silver blush, which is, I've forgotten the species name, but 2 different ones. I was a bit like, I kind of want to see how well they grow before I practically neglect them. Although things do grow from neglect, like these ones. And I've got a little, you can't really see, it looks the same. So yeah, so sphagnum and peat and that lot, a lot of people do use for different things. So peat you can actually buy for aquariums. JBL does it in Europe. People buy peat balls to reduce, it's kind of pH. I just don't like. I tried it as a kid. The water was too hard to do anything. I don't really like doing about it. Actually messing with it in the tank. Especially if you've got a soft water tank, it can swing things a little bit more. And then it does add into botanicals. And the big thing with botanicals is I think don't add too much at once. Like I personally think adding a whole palm in there was a bit too much, because it did actually end up producing tannins. Online it said they do not produce tannins. I'm not fussed about tannins, but it had tannins and you could kind of see it. So I added in the polyfilter for that, and it also just got bought to sell it all over the front of glass. It's not as bad as that tank, which grew large biofilms when I added in some fresh wood. The biofilms are fine. It's fresh wood. It's my own risk to take. That's had fresh wood in it. And you can kind of see these little white growths. And that's just bacteria growing where the, what's the word? Sap is just coming out the plant, because in all honesty, if you dry out wood, is the sap actually going anywhere? It's just going to be this dry thing. I guess it will come out slower as you as it sort of decomposes. But the experiment also is to see whether the fish feed on fresh wood. No, they don't. My fish do not touch the wood. The snails like it, and that's it. So, and not they're going to feed on it. Bark, they have no interest in. I have Pinaculus in that tank. They're meant to be breaking it down, and they are looking at it. They're not even looking at it. So, hi Zen Ginger. So adding in fresh wood, I can say, does not appeal to my fish. It's not that anything free or cheap does, given their choice of vegetables and their choice of fish food. So I think kind of before, I guess I go more into discussion, when it comes to the science, and I see a lot of science quoted, it is really difficult because there's so many variables and you got to look at the methods. And I don't think a lot actually applies to the aquarium hobby as much as people think, or you have to really critically analyze it. A lot of it is looking at aquaculture, and aquaculture is about keeping fish short term. You don't want to keep a fish long if you're going to sell it, or you don't want to think about spending a lot of money on it. I do have weird fish. I have a lot of weird fish. And they're weird to look at according to a lot of people. I find them kind of normal. But I guess the most normal I have got, blue emperors in there. The platies for now, because I'm kind of going to get rid of them. Discus are just weird for a cichlid. Like, that is a round cichlid. And then you've got, like, I guess Pterophyllum, the angelfish, are probably the weirdest, because Sevums aren't too different from a dinner plate. And she's looking a lot healthier. Like in some of the videos earlier this year, she has been ill and then she's recovered ever so slowly, as Discus like to be very slow. But they're quite friendly, especially him. I find that with Discus, the males are a little bit more friendly. Whereas Epistogram and dwarf cichlids, the females are just up at the front. What plecos do I keep? So this is Barian cistrus in here. So that's the Magnum, the Mango, and the Gold Nugget. So I have 2 Gold Nuggets. One is too old really to work out what L number it ever was. I think it could have been L18, but I'm not sure. So then I've got another 2 Mangoes and Magnum. I have got a Parancistrus, so that is often... So there's Chubby Pleco, which is around T. acus, and the AF, that's the one that goes gold. This is one that you never see, but it's really common in the river it's caught. Okay. And then I've got, in that one, Ancistrus, so I've got different ones. So I don't have the common bristlenose or any of those variants. I like different weird shaped fish. So I've got Ancistrus agaboensis, which is the green Medusa. I've got Ancistrus ranunculus, which is the normal Medusa. I've got Ancistrus macrophythalamus, which is the blue Medusa. They're not actually closely related to any of those. I did have L255, and I have got preserved L255, which is closely related to the true Medusa ranunculus. Then, I've got Ancistrus L309. Like the jars are, well, I've got, So this is one people like. This is a blue-eyed panax, so Panax cotyledon. This was donated to me. I don't do much of them. I kind of work with them, but they don't really interest me. I do really want a hypopotomine. I want some little ones like Astridium, but actually, well, I've got this one. So this is one of my favourites, but I can't do a video on it because I don't know what I'd say that would interest people, but this is a Rhinelepine. So this is Rhinelepis, I think. So this is most closely related to Pseudo-Rhinelepis guinabarbus, but also L95. So that's the porcupine pleco. They just get alcohol. They just enjoy it that way. But this is one of my favourites because I've never seen them in the aquarium trade. I've never seen anyone own one. But this is an aquarium specimen I got given to CT scan. And it's like, it's one of my favourites, but no one actually has it. So this guy, I'll hold it this way. So this guy actually was preserved originally in acetone, which is a solvent. And what's that? Was it acetone? Acetone wouldn't preserve at all. So I do have some dried specimens because they actually dried out. And so the acetone does go mouldy, and I had to sort of wipe it with, what did I have at the time? I got isopropanol. And so most of them went mouldy. This one was still in alcohol, but it has no inside. So I don't know if they decayed or it was dissected. But it's an absolutely gorgeous fish, and you can't see any of it, and the colours don't really matter any because it's kind of a grey one, but it's one of my absolute favourites just because they're so weird, and I would like to own them, but none of the smaller species are available or I can find, and the only one you really find is L95. So, and I have quite a few different specimens. I've got more in the freezer. I need to actually find some Hypancistrus, ideally zebra, ideally wild caught, preserved. So that means they have to be at least, 10, 15 years old, which is going to be fun. Just because I need to CT scan. It's a type. So when you describe a genus, when you describe a species, you kind of like look at it and you kind of had this type specimen, this type species that is like the original, the actual one. And that's what Hypancistrus zebra, I believe, is to Hypancistrus. So that is the original, the OG Hypancistrus. So I need that because I did CT scan Hypancistrus inspector, and I've got a few questions on how different the diet actually matters between the species and whether those jaws in that species are actually reflective of the whole genus. And Hypancistrus inspector actually hasn't been included in phylogenies, so in any phylogenetic trees. So I don't actually know where it places. Annoyingly, also the Picoltia I test CT scanned isn't in any phylogenetic trees. So that's Picoltia oligospina. I really like that species. It's a beautiful elongate, not quite like a Sabajai, which is the Parapleco L75, but absolutely gorgeous fish. Really nice colours, not as big, so much easier just on the size. So it's one of those things I'm just having to work on. So kind of, I think, so mentioning the science, it is kind of a bit of a minefield and needs a lot of critical analysis because you're not actually looking at things based on the aquarium trade. You're looking at aquaculture where it's about efficiency. You've got to get that fish out quickly. It's got to grow. It's got to grow as quick as possible for as less money as possible. Think about the meat industry or any crops, anything like that. That's what people want. That's what you'll see when you're looking at aquaculture studies. One thing that was interesting is so when looking at nitrates, and nitrate tolerances. There isn't actually that many studies looking at below 50 ppm. It's usually 0, 50, 100, 500 or something. It's actually quite interesting when you look under different search terms and certain species that you find that there is a lot lower tolerance in what we keep. Obviously, marine organisms are a little bit more tolerant, and it's quite interesting when you think a lot of people think marine is so much more sensitive, but it's really a little bit more complex than that. So you really got to think about the context of studies, and I think with nitrates that's kind of interesting because it adds into that they are less tolerant than people give them credit for. But I also think obviously there's the balance when you've got plants, and that's the kind of thing you have to think about plants. What fish should I have? Should I keep certain fishes? You got to think also about what fishes are adapted to in the wild. Are they adapted to much nitrates at all? Which, especially for saltwater fish, nitrates does contribute to TDS. In the wild, most of them are measured via TDS, and if it's that low, how much of that is really going to be nitrates? And a lot of nitrates we're seeing in waterways are from pollution events, so that can be very misleading if you go to a local waterway like, oh my god, it's 50 ppm. And that's probably because some farmer down there has just poured in all their chicken shit. So especially my local waterway. I come from somewhere which used to have loads of chalk streams, these beautiful habitats. So there's every so often you'll see this plant, water crowfoot, really nice. Then you'll see this clear, no detritus, no silt, anything. You'll just see this beautiful river, no silt, and trout, that's what they like, that's where they breed. And then you come here and you see the pollution levels, and it's record high. There's silt, there's no fish, algae blooms, and I can't even film there because I'm almost like, what representative is that? And the UK has a massive pollution issue with our rivers. People can't even swim in them because of disease issues, and obviously lakes, the sea as well, because the discharge rates for sewage are insane. So nitrates, TDS, it doesn't say how much nitrates contributes, but when you've got a TDS of about 15, 6, 15, 50, 100, it's not going to be that much nitrates. Particularly if you look at the sort of habitats themselves, there's obviously the geological aspect, there's going to be other things contributing, and very little of that's probably going to be nitrates. A lot of where the areas our fishes come from are known as oligotrophic, so very low nutrients. So a lot of organisms are really fighting for this very little availability of nutrients, and it's quite interesting when thinking about sort of Loricariids or anything like that. Their food sources are usually known as autochthonous. So that is produced by algae and stuff like that, who's using the sun or light for a lot of their energy production rather than anything coming in externally. And this does really vary, but it's one of those extreme habitats that everything's fighting for whatever little there is. Hence why I think it might have been the David Attenborough where he showed all these animals sort of surrounding or going to these salt licks or rocks that were producing extra minerals that they could uptake because there's so little elsewhere. Everything's fighting for it, especially as you go upstream because it's just that pure rock. And it's very different, I guess, from where we're used to. I guess our geology here, I'm not sure. Could be a lot of clay. Chalk, where my parents come from, is quite interesting comparison. Hi, Nano, Aquarium guy. And it's kind of that very different comparison. And I think we forget kind of that diversity, and particularly when it comes to even Africa, but South America as well. People will say African cichlids, and that is like, because there is no one African cichlid. Each of the lakes varies a lot. And then as you go up, there might be softer water lakes, and there's also the soda lakes. There's Madagascar, etc. We're just gonna. Yes, that is wine. So it does vary a lot, and South America does too. While I really like listening to the Tint podcast, I do think, and a lot of people give this idea that South America is black water and very little white water, but it is extremely diverse. I think apart from my discus, none of these are black water. Actually, the pinaculars probably are. But you do find these wood eating, and I use that classification just because they go for wood to look for their food. Actually found absent of wood. Actually, it is good white wine as well. Tanganyika is absolutely fascinating. I like, to be honest, when it comes to Africa, I really like the Mamorids. So they're basically, so you've got gymnotiforms, South American knifefishes, Mamorids, African. Both are exclusive, not related, and they're absolutely fascinating. So I was talking to a scientist, and he said that when the fishermen were fishing for their fish, these fish would almost follow them and watch them, waiting for, I guess, fish to escape. They're extremely intelligent. Obviously, one of them is the elephant Peter's nodes. That's one that really bugs me because they're large shoaling fish. Amazing intelligence, proven brain size, oxygen consumption, electric fishes, and they shouldn't be as common. I like to keep them, but I don't want a shoal of, I guess, because they are like, what's it? I swear there used to be websites used to say 50 centimeters as adults, but these are like, thank you, these are just run-of-the-mill discus I got as rehomes from a store. They're Asians, but that's as far as I know. So I think Synodontis is they do have exceptional like taste, as all catfish do. There are electric catfish, but I don't know if the Synodontis do have electrical capacities. But what's interesting about Synodontis, I really like the algae rasping ones, and there's also close relatives in Mochokidae, which are really good with. So they're just they're rasping on algae, opposed to what people think of them as maybe more carnivores. And you do see them in the trade as well. So Shoutedeni, so not the puffer Shoutedeni, the Synodontis, it's named after someone. Also Pichardi, also named after someone. That's the other family I've never really looked at for Synodontis. So I do know about Triloganus, but I've never really looked into them. And they are definitely venomous, but a lot of catfish are. Loricariids aren't, which I guess isn't too bad because they are really stabby fish, and Aspirinidae are, so the banjos are really stabby that they just want to go for you. But I don't know how toxic. I know, so there's a marine catfish. Oh God, what's the name? Plotus lineata. So this is one found in the Pacific around Japan. It's actually banned in the UK now as a pet because it's invasive. But they, I think, can kill people. Plotus, another species in that genus can. So, yeah, catfish get really underrated for their venom, and Corydoras is enough to... But I think venom, kind of, you don't want to scare people, but you don't want to sugarcoat it. And you see the same with snakes, like hognoses. Some of their... Well, they can do quite a bit of damage. But I find it is quite interesting looking at... Well, African cichlids, I look from a distance. I mean, African fish in general. African catfishes I do like. I just think Memoridae there are particularly unusual. And obviously with gymnotiforms in South America, I'd love to keep them again. Actually, Another thing in Africa would be Xeno. Oh, why can't the African knife fish? Why can I not remember their scientific name? But they're lovely. I had a heater break and I lost the lot, so that's why I've got ink birds. But let's just say Loricarids are great at 45C. Knife fish not so much at 45C when your heater sends them up that high. But there's so many just unusual fishes that we forget about. So kind of the last bit to filters and whether you need one is ponds, just because I'll add that in because they're another thing. Ponds have this amazing aspect in that they've got entirely different plants you don't want in the house. So bulrushes have been used, I know, for sewage filtration. Do you want them in the house? No. They can break, their roots can break liner. They're big. Their flowers explode, or their seed pods, I guess, explode. Amorous and Natalis, isn't it? They're banned here. So I've only seen specimens. I really want them for a pond. Like, if I had a pond, I'd have weather loaches. I do want sturgeons, sterlets, and obviously you need the right size pond. But I do really want those. But I do really want the North American catfish. Sadly, they're not on our positive list, and I probably need to do a video about this because not many people know us in the UK actually have a positive list. Even people in the UK don't know we have a positive list. It is available. It's just you go on our government website and then you click a few buttons and you kind of filter through different things and you eventually find it, but you have to look via genus. And I don't know how up to date it is on genus, but North American catfish aren't on it. Probably for good reason, given so most of these aren't included for invasive nature rather than anything else. So Wells catfish, you can get all of these with a license, obviously, just paperwork, and it's kind of just interesting to look at or think about. Other things that are included are, I always forget the name, but these are the North American little brightly coloured shiners. Some of them are included and some of them are excluded. So we do have rainbow shiners, but the little colourful ones that are like little gobies, then they're not legal in the UK. And quite a few gobies I don't think either are. I always find it funny with what is a catfish and what is not, because people be like, pleco, it's a pleco, it's not a catfish. And I also get people like, when I say I study darters, that's it. So the North American darters. But I always get people like saying, oh, I caught this catfish, or, oh, so they get really big. And I'm like, here's my little. So I had one today, which was like, oh, that big. And I was like, oh, God, this is tiny little thing. And so obviously I do have big ones to study. So I think the largest is going to be Megalensistrus. That's going to be a 35 centimeter specimen. Obviously, I have scanned Acanthicus. Obviously, well, I haven't actually released half the scans, but I have put photos on Facebook, like personal one, I guess. Sunfishes, we are allowed. I think the mini ones, they're Everglades and stuff like that. I don't think we're allowed the bigger ones. I'd have to double check what is on our list, because it's like like an Excel document that someone working admin, it would take like 10 minutes to load. It's that big. The Tropis Cosa, I think that's the one that's legal. With Loricarids, aquascaping people, they go for these little tiny fish. I call them glasses fish because honestly, some of them, and I've seen people try and sell them to kids, and people start out in the hobby, and I'm like, firstly, you can't even see the thing, let alone see the colour. And that does include Axaroides, little Raspora thing. And I'm like, they're so tiny. They're nice, but also the green tetra. It's like, they're so tiny, and a lot of Hyperpertomenae also are. Ichthyologies are not colourful. They're kind of 50 Shades of Grey with a bit of yellow and stuff like that. But they're kind of interesting, and they can be kept outside in the UK if they were legal. The legal sunfish is that Everglades one and its relatives, but that's as far as I know. I know Everglades pygmy sunfish is legal. What's that other one? Florida flagfishes, but no one really wants them. The thing is, I think a lot of hobbyists, they think, and I've seen people try this with rice fish, where they're like, oh, we should all sell rice fish, or stores should sell rice fish because people won't buy goldfish. And I'm like, people don't want that, they want that. And you kind of have to work your way around them not having that in a tank that's that big. Florida flagfish are nice. I've worked with them vaguely, but I think, were they nippy? I don't remember. It was only very briefly. There were other so our selection of cold water is quite a bit limited, but on natives, I say our natives are rubbish. So that's the reason I don't go fishing. Not that I've really ever been, because we literally have stickleback. Stickleback are nice, but they're okay. Well, so obviously you've got everything people fish for: perch, tench, carp. It's really not the most exciting list of things. There's a little benthic one. We do have a species of loach, and that is pretty fun to know because that's the most exciting we have. We don't have any native catfish. Loach in Singa, we've only got the one species. So, and we have got lamprey. We've got 3 species, I think. So maybe sea, river, brook. We have 1 species of eel, which is takes me a while to remember some scientific names, but it's the European eel. And then some of them are quite transient. We have salmon, obviously, and trout, rainbow, and obviously gifts from America, be it having rainbows along with all of our grey squirrels, which if people want them back in the US, you can have all of ours. And then we do have the brown trout as well. The problem is with our our UK natives is a lot of our waterways are quite cold, and a lot of our native fishes don't cope with indoor temperatures at all, and even quite a few of our pond fish. So an interesting thing I think is sturgeons and sterlet above 21°C. They really start to struggle getting enough oxygen, and they struggle enough that they can't really, from my experience, facultatively air breathe. So you can't, if you take them out the water. And there was a customer that I walked once, and I walked past, and his kid had a sterlet out of one of the ponds, because they will come up to the front out of the water, and they don't last long like that. So they do have issues with oxygen. So a lot of they're not native, but a lot of our natives are like that. They don't really do well inside with our higher temperatures. And ponds is getting enough flow. So you do get some native tanks, but I don't think they're great long term. I've never had jelly deal. It does not appeal to me. I've been put off a load of fish because I have dissected many fishes, but only when I did a range of fishes I would have never dissected before. The amount of parasites, I was like, that's it, I'm done. I'm not eating quite a large number of fishes. Funny enough, the farm bred ones were pretty much clear of like parasites, which isn't kind of good, but also because farming like pollution, but it's kind of a little bit more complex, I think. And I don't fancy eating those nematode and nematode worms, copepods, like copepod parasites. It really does. A lot of people don't eat fish after that, I think, or they only have like fish pie where you can't see it. I think gudgeons. So the emperor gudgeon, I swear they never sold, apart from the adults. Catfish have the most. I do know catfish do have the most taste buds of any vertebrate. I think that's the only thing I can say. Oh, catfish with parasites, no idea. This wasn't dissecting catfish. This was dissecting sea fish. So it's like, undergraduates, they're doing a load of different dissections of different fishes, helping out. Catfish, so what parasites? So I've seen a range of parasites from imports. Also one specimen, you see some really funky things, but this was like a cyst and it was kind of gross. Like it's an encapsulated parasite. So some sort of worm, most likely. A lot of parasites, even like nematodes and stuff, you open the abdomen and they're kind of in this little shell on the abdomen. Worst thing is I was like, how do they get from being eaten out the intestines and onto this abdominal wall? And it was like they break out and I was like, oh no. But parasites. So I know that South American pufferfish and banded leporinas definitely quite commonly carry one particular parasite that I see almost every time, which is like tapeworm cysts. So I put under the microscope. It looks like white spot, and people be like, it's white spot, treat it with that. And now people be like, treat it like epistasis. It won't go away like that. So you worm it and it goes, or you just leave it and it goes. But I wouldn't say anyone is particularly bad. For the sea fish, poulting and whiteling, I'd never eat. They were the worst. And I guess there is that thing between bottom eaters and everything else. I think gudgeon that had this type of copepods quite commonly? Codworms, which is not a worm. But it's kind of a little bit like every fish, I guess, carries different things. I've never seen anything like catfish contain any particularly more. But yeah, I think, what was it like? I've seen fish lice particularly, but not on any particular fish. Other than, what was it, Parancistrus aepharantiacus, so the cheap chubby pleco, the one that's unlikely to turn gold. That's the time I've seen really fast fish lice. And another thing is anything that's like a cyprinid. Okay, my eel looks fine. He's swimming. So he's definitely fine, unless that's a female. I don't think so. She's fat, so it's not her. And I think I could see her anyway. For anyone that missed it, he swam up a filter earlier, straight in the internal for some reason, just to stress me out. So A big one is Dermocystidium. That is quite common with, crassiforms, so that's tetras and stuff. It looks like a worm. It's not a worm. The fish will deal with it itself. It's some sort of protozoan. It used to be thought of as a fungi, then it used to be thought of as something else, and it just goes. So a lot of things I don't treat for. Because then you end up like, it won't go because it's only going to go in the fish's immune system eventually deals with it. So you just kind of have to wait. Otherwise you're just treating for something that's it's not going to affect. So that was what, half an hour into the stream? I know he's not probably the most happy at the moment, but there's not much I can really do. But he looks fine. He looked fine when I looked at him. He's just swimming around. So it's a real issue with another aspect of pollution is medication. So not all water sewage works can deal with every medication. And I think a big one is firstly antibiotics, hence why they're restricted in the UK, probably not as tightly as they should be. Another one is steroid hormones. Obviously, you can't avoid steroid hormones in a way. They're so vital to human welfare, whether it's the contraceptive, HRT, you might be on steroids for X, Y, and Z. So steroid hormones are, I guess, lipid-based. They don't, not all sewage works can handle them well. So, and antibiotics, I think just limit your use as much as possible. I never use them on the aquariums. On myself, I've only... his fins look fine. Gills aren't flared. He's just... Well, he was moving a bit erratically, and now he's back to his normal ways. I think half of it is he does come to the front constantly for food, and it's difficult to work out whether he's bothered that he's coming to front or he's just wanting food. Afterwards, I'm going to have a good, ages sat next to the tank and staring at him. He's got a slight rub on his head, but that's expected. If he's going to hit the filter, he's going to have a slight rub. So I don't think he reached impeller just because it's quite a tight space. I don't think he's bigger than that to actually get through. So I think it might not have been he actually went in the filter. It might have been he hit part of it and never, because it is really tight. And I thought he went through, but he didn't because I never found him in there. It's one of those things. But yeah, I think goldfish are just a mess. Obviously, I don't keep them anymore. I really like goldfish. So I really like telescopes. I never did before. So my favourite originally was the Tosakin. So Japanese, it's got this beautiful fan-shaped tail. And I really like Jaikin, which are like, so they do have a questionable ethics to them, but they naturally, without the questionable ethics, have a tail that's like a peacock like that. And they're just a bit more elongate, but still a little bit more deep. Hi, Anthony. Dr. Anthony. And Whacking are lovely too. They're very similar to Jaikin. Jaikin do have questionable. If you see one that is, 13 spots, so it's got to have red on the tail exclusively. So the caudal fin, both pectorals, anal, dorsal, and I think one on each gill. That is usually done via removing scales, the red scales. And you'll see that with koi as well. If you find a perfect tancho, that spot is usually not created particularly naturally. So that is questionable. But I really like fancy goldfish. I think they're fascinating. I think they're adaptable. Well, should be adaptable. The telescopes are brilliant. Mine, I would put strong current in, no issues. And I think they're just really nice fish. The problem is that swim bladder that there's no selection against, and you see breeders constantly and people supporting this, that they're not saying, looking at, firstly, you want to see the parents, I guess, like dogs nowadays. You want to know how that fish, how old the parents are, how long they've reached, whether they're going belly up, whether they're floating. You want to see also, I guess you want to see them long term, so not buying online. I really want to see a photo of an undisguised ancestors. I really like, especially the ones in the Andes, can be really unusual. I really want to look at what's the ancestors from the lowlands compared to the sort of higher up in the Andes. But fancy goldfish are just, I really think, are a mess. And that probably is why they're having issues. It's that swim bladder. They don't last. It's a kill switch. And a lot of people talk about inflated, overinflated and constipation. No, I think it's literally just that they're created so they're deeper than they should be. People breed them so that swim bladder has not got much placement anyway, and it's being shifted by the other organs, because whenever I see them, they're always floating on one particular side, which hints to me that firstly the swim bladder can't inflate and deflate properly. They do have the Simonius duct, which is from that digestive tract, so supplies it with air. So that's probably preventing it from filling and expelling air. But they're just getting stuck on one side. That whole organ's just being shifted and stuck. It's sad because they're smart fishes. And a lot of people slate them on the wrong things. Like the eyes aren't actually, I think, and you see all sorts of statements about their eyes, but it's never been substantiated. The dorsal fin, I don't think is entirely an issue whether it's there or not. The double tail, not entirely. If it is an excessively long tail, I think that's an actual issue. So whether it be a randa, whatever, that excessively long tail weighs them down a lot. And it's the same with betta. I think it's going too far in a way. So I like those sort of short, punchy tails that gives them a little bit more energy. And obviously bubble eyes are a whole thing in their own. Goldfish are just accident prone as well. They will bump into things. They will choke on things. They will do anything to do whatever. So, but they are, at the end of the day, they're interesting fish. If you want something that's got personality, they're great. They just do need larger tanks. There's so much enrichment you can do. I used to really enjoy doing planted tanks with them. I can't keep them anymore. And I did really enjoy doing outdoor ponds and working on the seasons with them. So, because they're quite fun to do if you think about seasonal change. Also, Channa, I've got a spare 60 litres and I really want to set it up for something, but it's a bit definitely too small for any of those two. But, I just think about some sort of seasonal change, because these guys, it's 28 to 30 plus, which is really pushing it electricity wise. Also oxygen wise. So when these electricity awful things go over, I'm gonna definitely up the flow in both the tanks, because the energy crisis hopefully won't last too much longer, and hopefully I can set up this little thing. I enjoy all sorts of animals, plants, etc. I've got African land snails. I've got my snake. I think she's gone to bed, and I think she's eaten, so that's okay. And then all of the plants that half of them don't get shown in video because, firstly, there's nothing here from the ground, so it has to be particularly large. And this has the most light. High aquatic moose and I think I saw Nano Aquarium guy earlier. So it's just getting enough light. I do have things that need moving around. So I've got a little Monstera, which I got given. So work out how or what to do, where to place that. But I think I'm going to shove that there. But I've got roots in water. So I kind of want it so it goes in a tank. I could do a video on them one day. Their cares, I guess. So African landsnapes, a lot of people say it's one of those strange ones that they're one of the most annoying fish to actually keep. Just because pets to keep, because food selectivity, temperatures, they're a bit more work than I think a lot of reptiles. And the problem is with heating, I hate heat mats. Heat mats are awful. So they do better when they're sort of on top of a bib or something, so they have some constant heat. Yeah, I think they're invasive in Brazil as well, because my godmother sent me photos from an island near Sao Paulo of a African land snail, which I guess people imported them for food, and obviously there's a whole mixture of cultures, and so I guess it must have been imported to do with that, because we do have them sold as food, I think, occasionally here, like Camden Market. But luckily they won't survive outside here. Yeah, I really want to see hognoses, like photos of them in the wild. They're sweet, they're dry. Like, she is just there. I probably won't get her out because I only fed her 2 hours ago. So she probably won't regurgitate. I don't want to risk it. And also she's very food motivated. So it's really difficult to get her in, or I don't want her to get bitten, especially live on stream. Like, I can't get to a hospital without booking a taxi then. Now, African land snails, just in the critter keeper. So there's so much debate in their care, and I guess it's based on you want high humidity, but there's very little aeration. And it's one of those things, there's a lot of pets we keep that there's not actually much on. So you'll find that with guinea pigs. If you ever look at the science, there's next to nothing on their diet. And there's next to nothing really about, well, I think about inside versus outside care. A lot of people keep them on blankets, which I think is a bit patronizing almost, kind of like keeping a dog in with bubble wrap around it and little shoes. But there's so much about animal care that is forgotten. If I get bitten, firstly, I have been bitten by a hognose before. It was a tag, and I'm not allergic, I guess, to the saliva, but then if she wants to eat, then she's going to get me with the rear fangs, so I don't. And if I go to Peru, I will try guinea pig. I would love to know about how much it would be to actually import one of their giant pet guinea pigs. I think they do appear in the UK occasionally. Like, people do own them. People actually do own Brazilian guinea pigs, a wild species, and I really would like some. I've never seen magic round bat. It's not. I've seen I guess clips, and it was creepy, so I was like, no. But yeah, snails are. I have the aquatic snails as well, so you can see. So the size. These are rabbit snails. This is, I guess, it's like some sort of extinction event in there, and I often think about it in terms of conservation, because I've got assassin snails, and you barely see any, but these guys cannot reproduce. Like they produce babies, and the eel's fine. He's just acting normal now. Definitely acting normal. Um, the assassin snails just annihilate, and there's a graveyard of baby ones. I think you can get bubble wrap clothing. There's some that does look like bubble wraps, and I think even winter here is just like grim. But I do really like. So I actually bought the Asalone spixie. Was it banded apple snails, Chinese apple snails? And I never saw them before, and they're never anywhere. I had to Google what they are because the person didn't know. And so I bought them. I bought 10 of them, and I was like, oh, these are amazing. Looked up what they are, made sure they were legal. I bought them from someone in Germany, and they bred. And I would give hundreds to stores. And then I was like, in the end, I literally just like grabbed assassin snails and chucked them in each tanks because there are just so many. And now, obviously, the assassin snails have annihilated this guy's population of guys because there's several. And now I don't have any more rabbit snails. Maybe I should. Well, I mean, I have rabbit snails. I just need more. I thought guinea pig would be cheaper. I don't know. It's never served here. As far as we know, given our horse scandal. Quail eggs are good, and I need to find some for the snake. So I went to supermarkets, and it makes me feel really like posh or patronising. Now they're always begging for food. But I was like, oh, do you have any quail eggs? And they were like, oh, no, you should go somewhere like Waitrose. And I was like, oh. Because, like, I've tried duck. I bought some bloody expensive duck eggs for her as well instead because I was like, that's miles away to go to Waitrose. And she didn't eat that. So, but when she's sort of vomiting or half vomiting, she can be really iffy. Usually fish brings her out of it. But yeah. Guinea pig. So they're not actually in the room at the moment. Otherwise, I'll pick one up. So they're all outside. They're quite loud. And especially if they were here now, they would be screaming because they don't just stop. I have actually got a guinea pig called Marigold. Marigold because I was going to name her Pumpkin. That's too generic, I was told. So she's Marigold. And then I half call her Pumpkin because she's round. Yeah, so it's 9:43. So I'll probably end the stream now because it's nearly 10 o'clock actually here, and I'll probably got an early morning anyway. So I'll say goodbye now, and I am away at a conference next week, so I don't know whether I'm going to be able to. Probably won't be able to film anything next week. I might be able to film something for next week. So actually guinea pigs I think have been here actually as a species since Tudors. Like there's Elizabethan paintings of guinea pigs. It's quite funny because they're like you'd expect any other animal but guinea pigs to be in these paintings. Anyway, so I might be able to do a video next week, not sure. Anyway, thank you for watching and goodbye.